So tonight we are working on wireless network security. So wireless attacks. There are several attacks that can be directed against wireless data systems, which include Bluetooth attacks, NFC or near field communication attacks, radio frequency identification systems, and wireless local area network attacks. Now, from what I've seen, Bluetooth seems to be the easiest to attack, which is why it's always best to keep those turned off if you can do that at all. Bluetooth is wireless technology. It uses short-range radio frequency transmissions, so it provides rapid device pairings. It's a personal area network technology designed for data communications over short distances. The primary type of Bluetooth network topology is PicoNet. It's established when two Bluetooth devices come within range of each other. One device, the leader, controls all wireless traffic. The other device, the follower or followers, if you can hook multiple devices up, take commands. Active followers are sending transmissions. Parked followers are connective, but not actively participating. So this is just an example of what that looks like. You have your leader active and then you're parked. Or if you have multiples, you have multiples attached at the same time. Bluejacking, this is an attack that sends unsolicited messages to Bluetooth-enabled devices. Usually involves text messages, images, or sounds. It's considered more annoying than harmful because there isn't any data that's stolen. I've seen this one happen a lot in junior highs and high schools when they have Bluetooth-enabled projectors and things like that, and the students get bored and the teachers don't know exactly how to turn them off. I've seen some very interesting things happen with those. All sorts of unsolicited, interesting pictures, and that was actually one example that did actually happen in a high school that the student got in a lot of trouble for. So yeah, that does happen. Blue snarfing, this is an attack that accesses unauthorized information from a wireless device through a Bluetooth connection. The attacker copies emails, contacts, and other data by connecting to the Bluetooth device without the owner's knowledge. This is why I suggest turning them off. NFC attacks. So near field communication is a set of standards used to establish communication between devices in close proximity. They're like very close proximity. Devices are brought within 4 centimeters of each other, or they're tapped together. Two-way communication is enabled. Using NFC can be active or passive. Passive NFC device contains information that other devices can read, but does not read or receive any information. So like those NFC tags. An active NFC device can read information as well as transmit data. So some examples: automobiles, entertainment, offices, retail stores, transport. A lot of times, if you can also turn 2 phones into NFC devices and tap them together to swap things back and forth as well. They're used as contactless payment systems. So the consumers can pay for purchases by tapping the store's payment terminal with their smartphone. And yeah, a lot of what people see with NFC now is the payment systems. RFID attacks. These are commonly used to transmit information between employee identification badges, inventory tags, books, labels, and other paper-based tags that can be detected by a proximity reader. So those of you that have seen us talking back and forth about the little devices, there is a whole section on using those to read RFID badges too. Most RFID tags are passive. They don't have their own power supply because they don't require a power supply. They can be very small. The little chips that your kitties and puppies get are RFID tags. Usually they go, okay, Kitty, I'm going to use you as an example. Usually they go right back here in the scruff. Sometimes they'll go in the sides here and here. And now she's mad at me. But yes, calm down. So they don't have a power requirement, so they can be put in those little tiny chips, and they look like a little tiny pill almost, and they're injected with a needle. And I'm sorry, yes, I upset you. And they just put it up under the skin. They can be susceptible to a couple of different attacks. Yeah, I guess technically you could chip your kids. I don't think I would. You're going to get down now. She's like, you messed with my scruff. How dare you? And this is Benny, if you guys haven't been introduced. Then we have wireless local area network. Oh, we're going to be okay now. Attacks. So a WLAN is designed to replace or supplement your wired LAN. It's important to know the history and specifics of the IEEE WLANs, hardware necessary for wireless networks, and different types of WLAN attacks directed at enterprise and home users. Okay, so I do not expect you to remember all of these. A lot of us will, because we've worked with wireless stuff. So Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, which is why you see why they do IEEE instead, is the most influential organization for computer networking and wireless communications. In 1997, they released the final draft for WLAN standard and called it IEEE 802.11. And then there were amendments. And when you look at your routers, you know how they talk about whether or not these work. Well, if you see the different router types, that letter on the end is actually related to these drafts. So you have the ABG, NAC, and AX routers. And to reduce confusion, the Wi-Fi Alliance adopted consumer-friendly version numbering. So that's why you see the Wi-Fi 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because usually when you ask people, do you have a wireless card that supports ABG and AC, you just see their eyes glaze over if they have no idea what you're talking about, which most people get all sorts of terrified in technology stuff anyway. So hardware, wireless client network interface, card adapter performs the same function as a wired adapter. The antenna sends and receives signals through airwaves. An access point, and you'll hear wireless access point, or WAP or AP, depending on where you're working, is essentially located WAN connection device that can send and receive wireless signals. Primarily consists of an antenna and a radio transmitter receiver. Access point functions are it acts as a base station for the wireless network, and it acts as a bridge between wireless and wired networks because it can connect to a wired network by a cable. A WLAN using an AP is operating in infrastructure mode. Networks that are not using an AP operate in an ad hoc mode. Devices can only communicate between themselves and cannot connect to another network. This is with ad hoc. The Wi-Fi Alliance has created a similar technical specification called Wi-Fi Direct. A residential WLAN gateway is used by small offices or home users to connect to the internet. Types of APs include fat versus thin APs, controller versus standalone, and captive portal APs. WLAN enterprise attacks. In a network, a well-defined boundary protects data and resources. The boundary is known as hard edge. There are two types of hard edges, the network hard edge, and the second is made up of the walls and buildings that house the enterprise. The introduction of WLANs in enterprises has changed hard edges to blurred edges. There are several types of wireless attacks that can be directed at that enterprise. Those attacks are covered on the following slides. So rogue access points, which those really suck, is an unauthorized access point that allows an attacker to bypass network security configuration. Usually is set up by an insider, may be set up behind a firewall, opening the network to attack. I saw several of these from students that would just plug them in. So schools especially are this is a problematic thing because students think they can just come in and plug them in, and then you have to go what is that piece of hardware? So you have to do more scans more often to find these. Evil twin. This is an AP set up by an attacker, so it's similar but not exactly the same. It mimics an authorized AP, whereas the rogue one doesn't. Is usually they just plug it in and it's like anything goes. But this one, it tries to look and act just like an authorized one, and then it captures transmissions from users to Evil Twin AP.
So Rogue is basically just a door, and Evil Twin is kind of a disguise.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's an interesting way for them to have oriented that. So rogue access point and Evil Twin attacks. You'll see the Evil Twin out on the top there. And then the rogue IP is the rogue one's kind of smack in the middle. Intercepting wireless data. An attacker can pick up the RF signal from an open or misconfigured AP. Using a WLAN to read this data could yield significant information to an attacker regarding the wired enterprise network. Wireless denial of service attacks. RF jamming occurs when attackers use intentional RF interference to flood the RF spectrum with enough interference to prevent a device from communicating with the AP. Spoofing occurs when attackers craft a fictitious frame that pretends to come from a trusted client when it actually comes from your attacker. And manipulating duration field values occurs when the attacker sends a frame with the duration field set to a high value, preventing other devices from transmitting for that period of time. So RF jamming, you can actually make RF jammers. There's all sorts of ways to do that. You can buy them online. So they can be quite.
You can also RF jam quite easily with, I know there was quite a few settings on a lot of our systems in the military that we weren't allowed to use except in theater, because if you turn them on, it would blanket such a wide spectrum of radio frequencies that it would interfere with like the FAA and a bunch of other.
I can believe it.
Basically anyone using radios or trying to use radios within like 30 or 40 miles or something, basically the entire transmission range that we were having if we weren't bouncing signals. If we were bouncing signals, it got way worse.
Yeah. It's RF jamming really isn't as difficult. It's probably the easiest of the three to do.
So when I was active duty Navy, that's actually kind of what I did. I did a lot of electronic warfare. And as I mentioned in my comments, that's one of the greatest ways to mess up is by jamming another ship, whether it's your own ship or another country's ship. If you jam another country's ship, it's basically almost like a declaration of war. So we can never actually turn on our actual knob that actually allows us to do jamming, because it's really only a wartime situation. So jamming and lighting up another ship with a fire control radar is also a act of war. But
that's good to know.
Yeah. So whenever we pull in ports, our antennas were so sensitive, we actually had to shut them down and then put tinfoil over them just so we don't fry the system.
Oh my gosh!
Like radars are just I
had to create your own little Faraday box on that, huh?
Pretty much, yeah. And then we had to follow the tinfoil after we took them off and we wanted to see.
That's crazy. So yeah, military grade stuff is a titch more powerful than the stuff that we get out here. So then there's wireless consumer attacks. So most home users fail to configure any security on their home networks. Attackers can steal data, read wireless transmission, inject malware, and download harmful content. Now, if you scan around you, it's really easy to do. There are all sorts of things to do when you're scanning the channels. When I first installed my Wi-Fi, I was shocked by how many of my neighbors didn't even have passwords. So since if you can look up the sexual offender registry quite easily online, and we had a few around us, I said, you might want to turn those on because you don't know who's going to get on there. And you might consider doing that for your neighbors just to make your life easier as well. Okay, knowledge check. Which wireless technology establishes two-way communication when two devices are brought within 4 centimeters of each other or tapped together and is often used as contactless payment system? Bluetooth, NFC, RFID, or the 802.11ad? Radio, NFC. And that big one, the big key there was that 4 centimeters and the tap together stuff there. So vulnerabilities. In the original 802.11, committee recognized wireless transmissions could be vulnerable. They implemented several wireless security protections in the standard while leaving others to the WLAN vendor's discretion. Several of these protections were vulnerable and led to multiple attacks, because of course they did. Wired equivalent privacy, or WEP, is 802.11 security protocol, which is like the very first one, designed to ensure that only authorized parties can view transmissions. It encrypts your transmissions. A secret key is shared between wireless client device and the AP. WEP vulnerabilities include the following. WEP can only use 64-bit or 128-bit number to encrypt. Initialized vector is only 24 of those bits. Short length makes it super easy to break. WEP violates the cardinal rule of cryptography, which is avoid a detectable pattern. Attackers can see duplication when IV starts repeating. So that was the first one that they did and went, oh, this is not good. So if you're still using WEP, that's not good. Wi-Fi protected setup, WPS, is an optional means of configuring security on WLANs. 2 common WPS methods include the following. PIN method, which utilizes a pin printed on a sticker of the wireless router or displayed through a software wizard. User enters the PIN and security configuration automatically occurs. Or the push button method, which the user pushes the button and security configuration takes place. Design and implementation flaws include the following. There is no lockout time limit for entering pins. The last pin character is only a checksum. The wireless router reports the validity of the first and second halves of the pin separately. MAC address filtering. Wireless access control is intended to limit a user's admission to the AP. The MAC address filtering is most common type of wireless access control. It's used by nearly all wireless AP vendors, permits or blocks devices based on MAC address. The vulnerabilities of MAC address filtering include the MAC addresses are initially exchanged in an unencrypted format. Attackers can see addresses of approved devices and substitute its own device. Managing a large number of addresses is challenging. So if you're doing basically the whitelist block list, if you have a huge bunch of those, it becomes difficult quickly. So this is just an example of what MAC filtering looks like. Allow only stations in list, block all stations in list, and those are your options on at least on this one. WPA, Wi-Fi protected access, was introduced by the Wi-Fi Alliance to fit into the existing WEP engine without requiring extensive hardware upgrades or replacements. There are 2 modes, WPA personal and then enterprise. WPA addresses both encryption and authentication. Authentication for WPA personal is accomplished using a pre-shared key. On a WLAN, a PSK is a secret value that's manually entered on both the AP and each wireless device. Devices that have the secret key are automatically authenticated by the AP. All right, what does the WPA personal protocol use to establish authentication? Digital cert, MAC address, PIN, or pre-shared key? And I literally just said this. Yep, pre-shared key. Wireless security solutions. Modern wireless security solutions are much more secure. There's WPA2 and WPA3, which are the new foundations of today's security solutions. So WPA2 is based on the 802.11i standard. There are two modes, again, personal and enterprise. It addresses two major security areas, which are encryption and authentication. AES CCMP encryption. The encryption protocol used for WPA2 is the counter mode with cipher blockchain messaging authentication protocol, CCMP. It specifies the use of CCMP with AES. The cipher blockchaining message authentication code component of CCMP provides data integrity and authentication. The 802.1x authentication for the enterprise model, called the enterprise method, uses the 802.1x standard. The standard provides greater degree of security by implicating port-based authentication, which you don't necessarily need on your home-based system. And then it blocks all traffic on a port-to-port basis until the client is authenticated.
Wait, I thought it was 802.1ax, not x. Going from just off of like what was at the front, like when you first went over the,
I think you're thinking of, hold on.
I think it was at like the very first page, like the first or second page.
That is, this is talking about authentication, and then they were talking about, they're two different things.
Yeah.
This one's authentication, and the other one is the channels, or not the channels, the kind of, it's the ABCD, you know, the ABC thing on the.
I get what you're talking about. I literally had a brain fart. Like I saw.
No, you're cool.
Like, no, there's no match.
I think that's why they tried to make those, like, quote unquote consumerized the version numbering, because they're so close that stuff like that happens frequently. Okay, so here's your example of what that looks like. Yeah, 802.1 versus 11. Thank you, Joshua. I knew there was another number in it, but after you spout a whole bunch of them when you're lecturing, your brain goes, so. EAP, or Extensible Authentication Protocol, is a framework for transporting authentication protocols. EAP defines message formats. EAP uses 4 types of packets: request, response, success, failure. A common EA protocol is Protocol EAP, or PEEP. PEEP simplifies deployment of 802.1x by using Microsoft Windows logins and passwords. It creates encrypted channel between client and the authentication server. Okay, and then there's WPA3, which is the next generation. So the improvements on this, it includes simultaneous authentication of equals, or SAE, which is designed to increase security at the time of the handshake when keys are being exchanged. It supports longer encryption, so 192-bit encryption. And when using open or public Wi-Fi networks, it applies individual data encryption. It has improved interaction capabilities with IoT devices as well, because one of the big things that we saw hit between the WPA 2 and 3 was the IoT devices. Additional wireless security protections. Other security steps can be taken to protect Wi-Fi networks, such as installation and configuration, specialized systems communications, and rogue AP system detection. Now, that can be done via specialized software or hardware. Installation. Important considerations must be taken into account when installing a new WLAN for an organization. All areas of a building should have adequate wireless coverage. Now, I'm going to stop here for a second. In order to create adequate wireless coverage, you need to do a, wow, my mind just had the phrase and it just went out the window. A survey, a site survey. You need to go out and survey the site. And I've seen a lot of places that do not do this up front, and you have all sorts of problems. There are tools that are created that you go out, you do your site survey, and it tells you like your signal strength. It gives you all sorts of ideas for, especially if you've got like brick walls with all sorts of stuff in your walls, which happens a lot. It'll give you areas where you need to have higher Wi-Fi density coverage and things like that. But if you don't go out and do that, you're just asking for future problems, especially if you have to expand. All employees must have reasonable amount of bandwidth. A minimum amount of wireless signal should bleed outside the walls of the building. In other words, you don't want to be giving everyone free access. A site survey, like I said, in-depth examination analysis of Wi-Fi site. Several tools can be used in a site survey. So you can do heat maps. Wi-Fi analyzers really are the best thing to do. And then channel overlays, because if you're in a large area, you want to have a good idea of what channels are being used in that area. So this is what a Wi-Fi heat map looks like. Configuration. Some AP configuration settings are designed to limit the spread of the wireless RF signals so that a minimum amount of signal extends past the physical boundaries of the enterprise to be accessible by outsiders. Signal strength settings. Some APs allow adjustments of the power level at which the LAN transmits. Reducing power allows less signal to reach outsiders. Spectrum selection. Some APs provide the ability to adjust frequency spectrum settings, including band, channel selection, and channel width. And if you know anything about Wi-Fi, it works on the same capacity that sound waves do. So different bands have different configurations for that as well. Antenna placement and type. APs should be located near the center of a coverage area. APs can be secured high on a wall to reduce signal obstruction and deter theft. If possible, the APN antenna should be positioned so a minimal amount of signal reaches beyond the security perimeter of the building. Another option is to use a type of antenna that focuses its signal in a concentrated direction toward your authorized users instead of broadcasting all over a wide area. Specialized system communications. Several wireless technologies relate to communications for specialized and embedded systems. There's Zigbee, 5G, narrowband IoT, cellular IoT baseband, and subscriber identity module or SIM cards. Do you have experience with Zigbee, or do you just hate the word? Not going to answer that one. Okay, moving on. Oh. Oh, so you've had actual experience with Zigbee. So this is one of those, it causes pain just to hear it. Believe me, I understand. I have those too. Rogue AP system detection. So identifying rogue APs is known as rogue AP system detection. Detection requires a special sensor called a wireless probe. There's 4 different wireless probes that can monitor airwaves for traffic. Wireless device probe, desktop probe, access point probe, and a dedicated probe. Once a suspicious signal is detected by a wireless probe, the information is sent to a centralized database where WLAN management system software compares it to a list of approved APs. Any device not on that list is considered a rogue AP. And if you have everything set up correctly, it should immediately shut down access so that you don't have, hopefully it shouldn't have gotten access in the first place, but if it does have access, then it should shut it down. Knowledge check. Which of the following is not a packet type used with extensible authentication protocol? Acknowledge, request, success, response. And we went over those really fast, so I don't expect you to know that one. So just pick one. Acknowledgement. That's why I said I don't expect you guys to remember that one. There was like 5 of them that I pounded off at the same time. Okay, so that is it for this one. All right. Are there any questions about what we just covered? I know these mods have been fairly short, but I figure I'm giving you guys extra time with Cengage being terrible lately.
I got
So,
one that I feel like I should answer. It's kind of critical.
yep,
What's a wireless network?
I'm gonna mute you now. I'm just kidding. I believe we've talked about it quite frequently. Okay, it's like a VPN. Yes, very funny. All right. So